Welcome to the Agronomy and Farm Management Podcast. I'm Bruce.
And I'm Josh, and we're your farm management hosts. Let's get started.
Well, Josh, there was a really famous TV show years ago called Dirty Jobs, and I'm thinking sometimes farm management feels like a dirty job on the farm that we have forced into, but the importance of a dirty job, the importance of all jobs on the farm is very critical for profitability and productivity. I was kind of thinking this morning, what are some of the dirty jobs in your world that kind of think about? It's like, gosh, that's one I have to do regardless.
Well, Bruce, when I think of dirty jobs, specifically on the farm, I go back to my days at my parents' goat farm. So we had 200 goats at one point in time, and I've been drugged through so-called mud, if you want to call it mud, plenty of times, whether it's trying to hold on to the goat and keep it in place, or the goat flipping me over, grabbing my ankle and dragging me through it. It's all happened. But I would say my favorite job, actual job, that can be considered dirty is mowing, like just getting out there, getting a feel for the grass, the dust, and all that. I love the feeling of that hard work, especially push mowing and weed eating many
Mhm.
acres and getting that all done and taking that cold shower afterwards. Bruce, what's your favorite dirty job?
Well, probably being a livestock person myself as well. Small ruminants, we have a commercial sheep operation. And so just this past week, we hauled manure out of some of our finishing pens for market lambs. And yeah, it is dirty. And you end up, why am I picking this up? And why am I putting it there with my bare hands? And then you think, well, we do all of this because we want to recycle those nutrients. It's so important to recycle those nutrients back to our farm, our production fields. There's an economic value of doing that. We're responsible for those nutrients. We went to all the effort of being livestock producers. By golly, it's fun to be able to put the swing back in that as well. So into the fields and make some great economic decisions and applying those nutrients back for production. Well, speaking of dirty jobs, specifically in farm management, Josh, we have a couple of guests with us today, and I was seeking them out because they're going to help us with some online tools that kind of designed to tackle the dirty jobs in farm management. And our first guest, I'll introduce Curtis Mahnken. He joined the Center for Farm Financial Management in 2010 as an extension economist. Prior, he spent 4 years at the University of Kentucky as an area extension specialist in farm business management. Curtis received a master's degree in agricultural economics from our land grant friends up north from Ohio here at Michigan State University. He grew up on a 100-cow dairy farm in southern Illinois and has been described as having milk running through his veins. I love that, Curtis. Welcome.
Thank you, Bruce. Glad to be here.
And our second guest that we have today is Mariah Beverly. She is an economist for the Center of Farm Financial Management. Her passion for agriculture began in the mountains of southern West Virginia, where she grew up helping her grandparents on their farm. This experience, combined with her past as a credit analysis and teacher, gave her the unique perspective on financial and educational needs related to farming. At the center, Mariah is dedicated to helping farmers master financial and business management to build viable, successful operations. Welcome, Mariah.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Well, our first question goes to Curtis, and really welcome both of you. And I want Curtis, if you could tell us a little bit more about the center as we described it, the Center for Farm Financial Management. Sounds like it's more than just a place to report to work.
Well, it really is. One of the great things about the Center for Farm Financial Management, or CFFM, as you might hear us refer to ourselves, is we're really mission driven. And our mission is to improve the farm financial management marketing abilities of the agriculture producers and the professionals who serve them. We do that through educational software and training programs. So how we do that, we develop software, web applications, other educational programs around the tools that we end up developing. And we're focused really on farm financial planning, financial analysis, business planning, commodity marketing. And we work with a wide range of people in the agriculture industry, including farmers and ranchers, but also educators like yourselves. We work a lot with lenders. Mariah is actually a former lender. We have a few of those on staff. But we also work with small business owners. And really, I like to say that we have a tool in our toolkit for someone anywhere within their farming journey, whether they're thinking about farming all the way to I'm going to hand off the assets to the next person. So we really are mission driven, and here at the University of Minnesota, they really do support us very well, where it's not just a place to report to work. I really enjoy all of my coworkers here, with the software developers, our event planners, our UI UX designers that we have. We really do have a great team, and it's a fun thing to come in every day and be able to do the things that we do.
I mentioned land grant university partners and friends as we did the introductions, but mention again, Curtis, who's your land grant university partner? Because we, across the United States, not every university has a little bit of everything for everybody. So we have to have this partnership from state to state. And so who's your land grant?
So we're here at the University of Minnesota in the Department of Applied Econ, and we work pretty closely with our Extension Ag Business Management team through helping them do a lot of their work as well.
Mariah, in a past episode of this podcast, we scratched the surface of one of the online tools called the crop cost. As we examine the cost of production, can you take us into a deeper dive of the center's tool? Because we know that calculating the cost of production is one of those farm management's dirty jobs.
Crop cost is one of our newer tools. I think it's been out a couple of years. And I think that one of the coolest things about crop cost is it's really made to be flexible for the type of producer that you are. So Curtis mentioned, we strive to help all range of farmers, whether you've got a small plot of land and just a market garden that you're working with, or you're a large commodity grower, big family farms. And this tool, it can be used for that spectrum, right? So you can use it as a commodity grower, or you just as a specialty crop grower with, again, a couple of acres. You can look at the cost of production for all of the crops that you grow. So you can look at multiple crops, and even for those smaller growers, I think a lot of tools are harder for smaller growers to use because they are designed to be on a per acre basis, like enter your costs per acre and things like that. And some of those smaller growers just don't have that kind of space, right? So even those smaller growers can put in area in square feet. You can get really granular and small with that. So I think the flexibility of that tool is really neat, but then also it helps you figure out those costs, right? It's going to help you think through the costs of all aspects of production, right? So you've got your direct costs, and I think that's fairly easy for a lot of producers to figure out, right? Like they spent X amount of dollars on seed for their corn this year, or I applied X amount of tons of fertilizer and it cost me this much. Those things are a little easier to keep track of, I think, for a lot of producers. But what really gets hard to figure out is some of that overhead, right? And when you're calculating cost of production, those should really be included, right? If you're not including those, you're not getting a true picture of the cost it's taking you to produce whatever it is that you're producing. And so things like hired labor, right? Like I hired people to help me, and they helped me across all these things on the farm, right? They weren't just working on corn, they weren't just working on soybeans. So how do I get a true cost of production for my corn when there's all of these things mixed in, right? So hired labor is one. That's the one that comes to mind. This tool makes it easier to allocate, right? It'll take those overhead costs and then it will spread them out across your crops to kind of get a really good picture of your overhead costs. And then, once you've accounted for those things, your direct costs and your overhead costs, you can get a cost of production for each crop that you're producing, and you get to choose the unit, right? So it's not going to dictate if you grow strawberries, right? You've got acres and acres of a U-pick farm or something like that, and you sell stuff by the flat. You can get a cost of production per flat and kind of match what the price is that you're selling with to the cost of production. So you're comparing, apples to apples, right? And corn and soybeans, right? That's bushels. So it makes it easier to get your cost of production, make that comparison to the prices that you're getting. And then you also get a sensitivity analysis, right? So like how tight are those margins? So if costs happen to increase, or if yields aren't what you expect them to be, what is that break even then across that spectrum? So I think that's a pretty 10,000-foot view without having to go into the nitty-gritty on how to use it, but I think it's a really nifty tool for producers to figure out that cost of production.
Really appreciate the flexibility that what you described, regardless of the size of a farm, regardless of maybe the experience or skill set of the farm manager. It sounds like it's a very useful tool. And so, Curtis, when does it become important for that farm manager, regardless again of farm size? Because I bet Minnesota and Ohio, we all have our fair share of these different sizes of farms and experienced farm managers. So when does it become important for that farm manager to know and to use their cost of production?
I would actually argue that it's always important to know their cost of production. I'm an economist. I'm going to say something like that, but just some examples, right? When you're looking at how much you can sell your crop for, whether it's you're selling to like a farmer's market, and knowing how much you need to bring in so that you can cover your cost of production and how much it costs you to actually make the things. But also, if you're a corn soybean farmer, knowing how much it costs you to raise that acre, that bushel of corn to compare it to the market, it really helps you kind of develop your marketing plans from there, right? So that you can kind of identify, okay, I need to have this much profit from what I'm doing, so I need to build that into my grain marketing plan. But if you're also looking at, maybe you're looking at expanding, or if you're a new or beginning farmer and you're trying to figure out how much you can afford to pay for a piece of land, knowing your cost of production outside of your land cost will help you identify how much you can afford to pay for that property. And then when you're writing your business plan, if you are really efficient at growing corn, growing soybeans, making milk like what my family has done for years, it helps you put that into a business plan and explain to someone why you're efficient in doing those things. It gives you kind of a thing to point to. It also, just from we're also heavily involved in farm benchmarking. Like Ohio State has a program that puts data into Finbin, another tool that we have. But if you're wanting to compare how you're doing to other farms of like size, of how profitability, same area, that gives you a point where you can say, okay, my cost of production is this compared to the top producers. So then you can kind of identify how you can continue to improve on your operation. So those are just a few ways that you could really use cost of production that you can generate from crop cost or some of the other tools that we have to be able to figure out how you're doing and how you can continue to improve.
The University of Minnesota, they really do have very good tools to use whenever we're talking about financial management. So beyond the crop cost tool, what else does a center have to help develop and help farms with those dirty jobs?
Well, we have a lot of tools, as you mentioned, and I'll kind of quickly I tried to make a list and I'll try to run through those. And Curtis, you help me if I forget any. So I think another tool that we have is called My Market Profit. I think Curtis kind of alluded to this a little bit in his earlier question. This one is for, again, some of those smaller growers who are doing direct to consumer marketing, and they're maybe selling at a farmer's market, and maybe they have a CSA, and then they're also selling to a restaurant. How does a producer know if those avenues are profitable? Right. And so My Market Profit can help you, again, allocate those costs and take into consideration the cost of selling those things through those different market channels and figure out, okay, is this farmer's market really profitable at the end of the day? And kind of help producers look at their spectrum of market channels and see that profitability. There's fair rent to help you look at rental arrangements and see, based on your costs and the arrangement, what is the break-even rent that you can afford. There's a tool called IFSAM or DIFSAM, which is interpreting financial statements and measures and then developing financial statements and measures. I think that's kind of hard for somebody who maybe doesn't necessarily come from a financial background to then be told, hey, put together a balance sheet or put together an income statement, right? Like those are challenging things, right? And this helps farmers to try to understand how to put those together. But then, once you've developed a balance sheet, right, it's useful to be able to glean information from that and then make decisions based on what that information is telling you. So interpreting your financial statements and measures help you figure that out, right? So once I've got a balance sheet, what do I do with it? How do I make an actionable decision based on what I'm seeing? Then we've got, kind of more in the business planning route, we've got Ag Plan, which helps you figure out how to put together a business plan. Then there's Ag Transition. So if you're trying to transition to the next generation, right? And there's a lot that goes into that, a lot of planning involved, and that kind of again helps you walk through thinking through how you want that to look, who needs to be involved, certain pieces like that. Curtis, did I leave any out? Are you thinking of any?
Well, there's a big one called FinPack that, the center was actually created around the FinPack tool many, over 40 years ago now, which will allow a user to create their balance sheet, create an income statement looking back, or even create a cash flow plan to look forward and do some projections. And then we also, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but we have FinBin. We actually work with the Ohio Farm Business Analysis and Benchmarking Program, and they use FinPack to collect some of that data. The farms that they work with then get the balance sheet, the income statement, the cash flow plan, and then that data can then actually go into FinBin. So anybody can go and look at FinBin, which is a database of farm financial records, and it's real farm data, all aggregated, so you can go and kind of compare how your farm is doing to that. So, like Mariah said, we do a lot of different things, but they're all kind of aimed at that farm financial analysis area.
So I've generalized about some farm managers and maybe have assumed that calculations and economics are maybe not as fun or interesting as maybe other jobs on the farm. How true is that generalization in your opinions? Or is that just a chip on my economist shoulder thinking that field and livestock work is maybe more fun than the farm management side?
Well, I guess I'll start with this one, Mariah, because when I was at the University of Kentucky, I worked directly with farms to complete financial analysis, doing balance sheets, income statements, that type of thing. And you're absolutely right. I think why I actually got into this line of work is our farm. We were on the Illinois Farm Business Analysis program, and my dad really did not like doing the financial pieces at the end of the year. So I ended up being drafted in quotation marks to help with putting some of those financial, the bookkeeping, getting it all together for our specialists. So it's not the most fun thing, but I will tell you that it is one of the more important things that you can do, just because it really helps you to understand all of the things that are going on. I mean, I like to say that the financial pieces, the numbers that you see, those are just a treasure map of everything else that's been going on your farm. All of the decisions that you've made around crop fertility or livestock, what you're feeding your cows, it's all going to show up there. You just have to kind of figure out how to get into the numbers and compare from year to year to see how things happen. So yeah, I mean, it's not one of the more fun things. Bruce, I think you mentioned spreading manure earlier. That was not one of my favorite jobs on the farm, but it was necessary because that feeds a lot of the other pieces of the farm operation with the crops and all of that. So when I worked with farms in Kentucky, if you can do one thing on it, on the financial piece a week, I think you're going to be staying on top of it. It doesn't have to consume your life, but it is an important thing, and it's a good thing to kind of come back and revisit each year, I'd say.
Different production sectors of agriculture have high and low levels of profitability. Crops, dairy, livestock, not all highs or lows are the same. How can a farm manager know if they're efficient and profitable?
I really like this question, Josh. And you invited two economists onto your podcast, so you couldn't get away without having one of us answer. Well, it depends, right? I think that understanding, being efficient and being profitable, those are related, definitely. But you can have a really profitable operation, but also be very inefficient, right? If the price is right, it could be a little forgiving, your inefficiency, right? And then you can also be on the flip side of that, right? You can be a really efficient manager, but again, if those prices just aren't there, you may not be profitable. So it really, I think it just depends on those prices and, using these tools that we've mentioned to know your numbers is really that key first step to knowing that if you're being efficient or if you're being profitable. So on the efficiency side of things, I really strongly suggest using benchmarking. And by that benchmarking, comparing to others or comparing to yourself. So I would say at a minimum, compare against yourself every year. See, okay, I spent this much on seed or fertilizer, or, this was my profitability last year. Making those comparisons year over year can help you improve efficiencies, right? So you can see where you can make little improvements. And then broadly, comparing to your neighbors, right? And how do you do that? Well, we have a tool for that, surprise, surprise, called Finbin. And that can allow you to pull up, across the Midwest. And Ohio contributes data to this as well. You can pull up Ohio data and compare yourself to your Ohio neighbors who are contributing to that Finbin database and see what kind of prices and what kind of costs are they facing, right? And then see where you can make improvements. And I will say, those improvements don't have to be drastic. There's not a magic bullet that's going to solve all of your cost problems or make this drastic improvement in this area. Most of the time, those improvements are going to be where can you save a little bit, like, 5 cents on a dollar, right? And those small improvements have a big impact on the bottom line. If you can do that in a couple different areas and make just small improvements on efficiencies there, it'll impact your profitability. And then I think understanding that ag is cyclical too, right? There are just going to be years that because of prices, even though you've done everything you can to be efficient, like the profitability just may not be there, right? And just understand too, like if you are having a really great year and being very profitable, what steps can you take to prepare for those down years, right? Because ag is cyclical and it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when our price is going to go down, right? And so you can weather that storm. So I think using those tools that we've mentioned and just knowing your numbers is really that first key step in gaining efficiencies and being more profitable.
Where I'm going to speak to a comment that you made when we answer a question from a grower with that extension response. Well, it depends. And I've taken the approach that we have to own that because we're asking that, well, it depends, or we're saying it depends because we care about our answer. And our answer has to be specific to that farm situation. So I think a good ag lender should answer questions with well, it depends. A good agronomist would also answer a question, well, it depends. And an extension professional can also answer questions, well, it depends. Well, what does it depend on? It's exactly what you described, Mariah, and that was the farm's actual numbers. There's no better place to start answering questions from our own data from our own farm. So, okay, let's switch gears over to Curtis here, and we're going to explore one of those tools that Mariah mentioned. And I don't believe that Ohio is unique compared to many other Midwest states in that a lot of Ohio cropland, 40 to 50%, is either rented or leased under some form of arrangement. And recently, as profit margins have tightened in the grain sector, more questions have come in to us about making changes to those arrangements, really to negotiate risk between those parties, the landowner and the farm operator. What's that tool that's available to help navigate this particular dirty job that we call maybe negotiating cash rent or crop share rental arrangements?
Yeah, so that tool is called Fair Rent, and it's just one word. You can Google Fair Rent, or you can go to our website, cffm.umn.edu, and you can find the link there. But that tool will help you evaluate land rental decisions. You can put your own information in about a piece of property. It'll tell you kind of what it thinks that the fair rental rate would be. There's lots of different types of agreements that you can actually put in and analyze. within fair rent. So that would be a great place to start. I'll add another one just because, again, with leasing, having an arrangement, having some type of signed piece of paper is useful. So the North Central Farm Management Extension Committee, we work pretty closely with them. There's a few members from the Ohio State that's part of that. Barry Ward specifically has been part of that. It's called Ag Lease 101, and that is where you can actually go and you can find some example documents, example lease agreements for different types of agreements. So if you're on just a regular lease, you can look for that. If you need to find something on flexible cash rental arrangements or pasture, or there's a lot of money being made in beef right now. So there's a beef cow calf or a beef cow rental arrangement lease publication that's there. So you can actually go look at that. So that's just called Ag Lease 101. Just another one of those tools that we work on.
Curtis, Mariah, it was really great having you on the podcast today. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I'll jump in. So I know we've mentioned a ton of tools, and you all, as listeners, are probably thinking, what's the catch? What do I got to pay for this? Is this another subscription? And we are a land grant. We like to serve. And as part of that, all of our tools except for FinPack are free. So the crop cost, the My Market Profit, the fair rent tools that we've mentioned, FinBin, all of those are free for anybody to use. So now there's no excuse. There's nothing holding you back from using those to help you up your farm financial management game. And you can find all of those on our website. I think Curtis mentioned it earlier, but it's cffm.umn.edu. And at the toolbar there, you can find our tools and click through and find the one that works for you.
Thanks for listening today.
For more information about farm management tips, be sure to check out the Farm Office at farmoffice.osu.edu.